Hello, welcome to Humanity and Beyond. I'm your host for the day, Tyler James, and I am here with my guest, Zoltan Istvan. Apologies if I slaughtered the last name. But he is most well known for being very politically active, trying to put transhumanism on the forefront of just our political spectrum in general. And I know it's a bit of a digression away from what we've been talking about with longevity medicine, but as I hope to expand upon with my questions to Zoltan here, everything that we're talking about with longevity, with the progression of technology, it all connects together because it's all stemming from the same sorts of principles. So I'll stop yammering on and let Zoltan introduce himself, maybe go into some projects that he's been working on in the back end.
Sure. Well, as your viewers know, my name is Zoltan Istvan, and what a lot of people know me for is kind of pushing the transhumanism movement forward. But my main emphasis has always been through transhumanism. Is life extension, the idea of using science and technology to overcome biological death and to live dramatically longer. But I've, as a kind of a former journalist, I'd written for a lot of different major places like National Geographic. You've maybe seen some of my articles in the New York Times, places like that. And then I ran a couple of political campaigns. Probably the most notable one was in 2016 when I drove a giant coffin bus across the country, and we got a lot of media attention. And now I'm working on a couple of different other projects, including transhumanist wine and just kind of constantly doing a lot of writing, publishing books on longevity and transhumanism, and staying very active in the field.
Well, and to my understanding, to help clarify for the viewers who might just be coming into this casually, transhumanism is just more generally the idea that we can exceed our biological boundaries, right? Whether that be putting our brains on chips, or whether that be, radically extending our lifespans through the use of technology. Is that accurate, or do you have some adjustments that you want to make to that to clarify?
No, that's 100%. Accurate. I think I just want to clarify that what transhumanism really is a social movement. You have to think of it in terms of almost like environmentalism as a social movement. So transhumanism is in its own self, its own social movement. And so around the world, there are millions of people that support using technologies to radically upend their life and, to completely live somewhat differently, and especially hopefully more in the future. But I think the social aspect of it is what's so interesting. The clubs, the meetups, the conferences, it's way beyond just technology. It's kind of an overarching lifestyle. And that's really where I think transhumanism has its strongest kind of features.
Mm-hmm. Now, for my own research, I've been writing recently on maybe the need to distinguish between a couple different gradients of the humanity spectrum, as it were, because as we're gaining in technological sophistication and as we become more and more potentially capable of developing the quote-unquote cyborg, I see at least that there's going to be a lot of social schisms that are going to arise because obviously besides the whole issue of equity, accessibility to bionics, to enhancements, et cetera, there's going to be the issues of discrimination, the inherent bias against one group versus the other. So a big question I want to pose to you, given your background, given your exposure to this whole area, is what aspect of our political system in the States, beyond, of course, our medical infrastructure, is lacking to serve the potential needs of a population that is enhanced with cybernetics or, trying to attain digital-only consciousness?
Well, I mean, that's a very large question, so I'll just try to kind of narrow it down a bit. I would say, for me, on a personal level, one of the biggest dangers I see about the modern world is that inequality seems to keep on growing. So there is this chance that we will have some individuals who have really cool augmented body parts, and as a result, they're much stronger in the workplace, and they're more stronger in universities or whatever. And that just seems very unfair to somebody who might have just by accident been born in total poverty with no real avenue of coming up. When you talk about technologies, you can really accentuate the differences between the classes. And not that I even like to describe people as in terms of classes, but the difference between somebody having a $5 net worth and someone having a $5 billion net worth is massive in terms of who lives longer, who gets quality of life, who gets to raise the better family or a better education, these kinds of things. And so I think we need to, as we go into the transhumanist future, really try to create a pathway where there would be more equality. It's one of the reasons why I support a universal basic income, despite my sort of libertarian leanings. I just can't see a way to create more equality, or at least the basics, a floor for everybody, without something like that built into the system, especially as robots take the job. So for me, when we talk about politics and social systems and even capitalism, how can we create a more equal system for at least everybody to have a good basic floor for moving into the transhumanist age? And that's imperative we do that.
Yeah, and just to clarify my own stance on the matter, given that I've got a background in philosophy, on the one hand, your libertarian argument makes absolute sense, because we can't advance liberty for everyone if we are hindering ourselves with our social baggage, as it were. So, to a degree, yeah, we can be libertarian leaning, but we can also be pro universal basic income. We can be pro universal healthcare, because that feeds into expanding our individual rights, our individual liberties, and everything else along those lines. So, glad that we kind of share that sort of same general.
And let me just add too, I think what a lot of people, maybe some of the hard libertarians that get mad at me when I talk about a basic income and things like that, is they don't really understand that society moves forward because we're happy as humanity's likes its life. It wants to move forward. It's peaceful. When things actually don't move forward is when everybody has their pitchforks out. It doesn't do any of the transhumanist community any good to have the haves and have-nots. What makes better is all of us support a single agenda, improving humankind through science and technology. And if that means sacrificing a few liberty or freedom principles in order to achieve the greater good, that we all go through this transhumanist age together in a way that's not a dystopian setup, and that's a real challenge out there, is not to create a dystopia with transhumanism, then some basic things like that, especially basic income and things like that, will be very beneficial for all of us in the long run. And I just can't, I think a lot of people don't realize that on the other side of people being very, very poor are their pitchforks, their guns, their anger. That kind of society is not what's going to lead to a good, free transhuman society. What leads to a good, free transhuman society is prosperity. So we want to have prosperity for everybody.
Right. It's not a move towards a social sort of system or a commune sort of system, but it's just the other side of the libertarian coin, as it were.
Sure.
Following up with that then, when we're talking about attaining total transhumanism, is there one specific thing that concerns you, outside of the current social unrest that we have within our own, populace here in the States?
Well, I think the 800-pound gorilla in the room is still and remains artificial intelligence. This idea that this is a huge, big proponent of, what transhumanists support, whatnot, and I do too, and the idea that one day we might be mind uploading ourselves, and, far in the future, whatever, or, all these different things with AI. But there is a chance that artificial intelligence, an intelligence smarter than human beings, arrives because of what we create, and it may not like human beings. So that remains the central dilemma in this transhumanist future that a lot of us envision as utopian. There is that great risk. I don't really worry too much about genetic editing. I don't really worry about overpopulation or environmentalism issues, because I think we'll fix them all with technology. But I do worry that we will create an artificial intelligence that's smarter than human beings, and I worry that it may choose not to need us or want us or like us. And that is something that we're going to have to come to grips with as a society. I'm not sure if it's either through regulatory bodies or it's just through international cooperation or whatever it's going to be. But we better make sure that the Terminator scenario doesn't happen. It is a plausible scenario. And I worry about it as probably the largest single existential threat to transhumanism.
Oh, yeah. And to kind of give a little bit of context to the rapid pace at which AI is accelerating, at least from the medical perspective, we have Google's AlphaFold system, right? Over the past 5 years, its capability has exponentially grown to the point where it is now able to do just as accurate amount of work as the protein researchers in their labs, but it can take minutes or hours, days, rather than months and years, which is partially why the the prediction for the structure of COVID-19 came out as rapidly as it did, and the vaccine production began as quickly as it was able to. I mean, without that technology, we would still probably be at the beginning stages of finalizing our vaccines and doing the emergency use authorization.
Yeah, no, I can't agree enough. I mean, people say, oh, Moore's law is dead. But the reality is, whether it's not 100% as quickly turning over, it's still turning over so quickly that, you're talking about, like, even just the other day, you may have read the major news that Japan created such fast download speeds in terms of you can download Netflix twice the entire library of Netflix in a single second now. And these kinds of download speeds, these kind of transistor speeds and microchips, software, everything's improving so quickly that AI is, maybe it's 25 years around the corner, this giant intelligence that's smarter than us. Maybe it's only 7 or 8. I mean, the experts are spread across the board. And so, but whatever it is, it's so huge. It's like almost inviting aliens to planet Earth that we know are going to be stronger than us. Is that really a smart thing to do with no way out? So, it remains, AI is growing incredibly fast. And I think people don't understand how fast technology actually changes year to year, especially now because all the big technology companies have their highest stock prices ever. So Google and all these companies are just reinvesting so much of their money. And, that money goes into innovation. I mean, that's a good thing. But it also means that the world's going more quickly than we probably once thought.
Oh, yeah. And, that will only be accelerated as they gain in using diamond semiconductors, whether they chemically dope them, as it's called in the field, or whether we go straight to optical computation, where we're basically using light signals like we do with the the fiber internet systems that we're just starting to put into a lot more cities around the nation. That's going to accelerate the process of AI development because we have the computation power, we have the computation speeds. What's holding us back is the amount of energy these systems use. And, obviously the more energy they use, the hotter they get, the harder it is for them to process. So they have to be cooled down. And it's just this whole cycle where we're basically siphoning off the energy we could be using for computation into cooling down these systems. But, I'm digressing, sorry.
No, but I mean, the reality is, like, you're spot on with all these new technologies. I'm glad your listeners have seen and heard some of the more technical sides. There are ways we're going to be computing that we haven't really most people haven't even heard of. And that's just how fast science has changed. I mean, the science of life extension, all the cybernetics, augmenting your body with the bionics, every single field is just exponentially growing right now. And I think the world will really be different in 10, 15 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to digress too badly, but you did bring up the bionics, and I do want to talk more about the notion of, again, the quote-unquote cyborg as we understand it in science fiction. But, my take on what a cyborgnetic, or, however we want to define that being as, is somebody who is maybe augmented with, say, a AI-assisted bionic prosthetic, whether that's their arm, their leg, whether they're putting a prosthetic in the cortex, whatever else. But, basically take the Borg, only a little less clunky sort of thing. And, again, my concern is that currently we treat a lot of people who need these sort of prostheses as being disabled or being, detrimental to the growth and wealth and well-being of society. Do you have any thoughts as to sort of those sorts of concerns and what we might be able to, try to do as a society moving forward to, make these divides less pervasive?
Well, I think, first off, the further we go down the road or into the rabbit hole, I think the more comfortable people get with augmentation. That's for sure. And it's a cultural shift. I mean, we just, I think when you start seeing people and start seeing driverless cars, start seeing different types of technologies out there, you realize your iPhone is always by your head or whatever. You start feeling more comfortable. And then I think pretty soon you get a robotic arm or maybe a prosthetic eye that can download things or whatever here in 5, 10, 15 years. And all of a sudden you feel comfortable with it. So it's really, in my opinion, a cultural transition that we just have to say, oh, well, this is how the world is. Just like we got used to the internet. At first, everyone's like, oh my God, the internet. Now all of a sudden it's like we take it so for granted. But I think there will be some breakthrough technologies. And one of the breakthrough technologies will probably be either brainwave reading headsets that really start like allowing us to maybe do the podcast just through our thoughts, or even more further, there are, I think, 6 companies and universities around the world right now, major ones that are working on prosthetic eyes. And because we have 2 eyes, and the new prosthetic eyes don't look like big, giant robotic eyes. They look very natural. It's very hard to see that they're prosthetics. If you get one, the ones that are trying to work on that might be out here, let's say 7 to 10 years. There's already a few FDA approved ones, but or at least government approved ones, but those are more clunky. But eventually we have this robotic eye that actually allows you to directly connect to your brain, that might allow certain types of vision, certain types of hearing, even through an eyeball. I know it sounds crazy, but there's you can change these things up. Might be able to download or have Google Maps built into it. Maybe we're not 7, 10 years away, maybe we're 15, 20 years, but those kinds of things are coming. And I think a huge part of the younger generation will be like, why not do that? That sounds super cool, especially given the idea that you will have a second eye that's natural. So it's not like it's going to be, you've completely given up your sight or something like that. And I think, those people that do it will have advantages. They'll have better vision because they'll be better telescopic, better zooming, better this, better that. And, there's some real, when people start feeling that and seeing some of the improvements in their lives, I think then they're going to say, wow, what else can I do? And then, there are biohackers probably a year or 2 away that will be amputating limbs to put on robotic ones. They'll be doing it for elective reasons. They probably don't need it yet. And obviously we have, war victims that have already, neural kind of, I suppose, laced robotic limbs that work off their thoughts, but people start doing it electively. It's quite different. So I'm waiting. I have some biohacker friends who are like, oh, who's going to be first? But that's too early for me, but I can see why they want to do that, to enter in the real kind of augmented age. And eventually we'll get to a point when it makes sense to do that, whether you're a football player wanting to throw a football a half a mile perfectly, or whether you're, just somebody who's into that kind of thing for your own kicks. Or even for construction. And, who doesn't want to, I'm working on a winery right now. Who doesn't want to be able to lift 500 pounds easily if you can? So, that's the age I think we're getting at. We're not quite there, but we will be soon. And I think more and more people are becoming comfortable with these ideas.
Well, and, we have the Swedes that are microchipping themselves so that they're doing away with, having to have their credit cards, their gym memberships, yada, yada, yada. There are also the tattoos that you can get that basically become or allow you to be more interoperable with certain devices. There's a lot of these sorts of technologies that, it's going to be limited to a select few, but as it grows and grows and grows, as you were talking about with the eyeball, a lot of people don't realize that everything that goes on up here is just electrical signals. So if you can route the neurons, obviously you're going to be able to hear better with an eyeball, even though that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think it just takes a few people doing it, and then all of a sudden, especially the younger people who will do it, they'll be like, hey, this is great. This is fun. This is cool. This is a part of a new cultural movement. And I think really that's how biohacking is caught on that way. Biohacking is really leading the transhumanism movement in terms of its color, in terms of its I guess, even population. It's like its youth, its vibrancy is really at the core a biohacking push. Whereas a lot of the transhumanists are just kind of either working on life extension, cryonics, whatever they're doing. But it's really biohacking that seems to make the news the most, is doing the most things. People are trying to come up with COVID vaccines in their own garage laboratories before the real vaccines were out. I mean, that's transhumanism. And I think the biohacking and the augmenting charge will really push it all forward once we have, we're almost there with the technology. It's just, there's going to be regulatory issues as well. Will the government allow people to do this? One of my, first New York Times opinion articles was really on Nevada kind of having a lawsuit against microchipping. Some people were trying to make it illegal. But luckily that did not happen yet, but it may happen in some states. And there's going to be a whole brand new barrage of kind of civil rights challenges and liberties framed around a lot of these brand new technologies.
Well, and then what concerns me is, especially since we're having this discussion right now in Congress about what to spend on infrastructure, part of that discussion is going to have to be, how do we protect ourselves against people trying to access our prosthetics, remotely? Because I don't like the term biohacking, because, the way I look at it, from the computer perspective, it's actually hacking the bionics. So that's why I'm more in line with the DIY bio sort of thing. But, is there a potential way forward that we can go about to maybe better protect ourselves while this is in development, or are we just in a hopeless loop, do you think?
Well, I think hopeless loop we're probably closer to the hopeless loop, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't go forward. It just means that there are going to be challenges, especially security ones, as people, whenever you start off, it doesn't matter if you were 100 centuries ago sailing for new lands, you really didn't know what kind of things you were going to find on the shore. And that's part of the danger involved. And there will be some mistakes. There will be some deaths. There might be some demonstrations and clashes, and who knows, maybe even civil wars over around this stuff. I wrote an article for Vice a long time ago saying that genetic editing could cause a civil war, because China apparently seems to be much more willing to move forward with some of those ideas than America is, given that we're somewhat of a Christian and conservative nation. And maybe not so much anymore, but a couple of years ago, that did definitely seem the case. And these issues, whether there's worries or not, people will push forward. But I think, even if it is dangerous, it's still worth it overall for humanity. There's never really been a point in time when science, this kind of radical science, has harmed humanity over the long run. I mean, almost always, it's just dramatically extended lifespans, made people's lives better, brought prosperity into the picture, increased people's wealth and things like that, and the time of their family. So even if there are some dangers, and the media makes a big hoopla about it, whatever, I still think it's going to be worth it. And I think, there's going to be a lot of media coverage when things go wrong. I mean, even now, it's like there's so many car accidents every day, thousands of car accidents across America, but you have one car accident with an automated car, just a driverless car, and the media goes crazy. And that's the nature of the game of transhumanism. And I think that will continue, especially with biohacking, as people start doing more radical things themselves. When something goes wrong, you can expect to hear a huge negative amount of press over it. But there's always been negative press for people that broke the rules.
Right. Now, I want to respect your time, so as we're wrapping up here, do you have any clarifications that you want to make on any statements that we've been shouting out here? Because I don't want to, put words in your mouth or, leave things unsettled if you want to get them settled out.
No. I felt really happy with everything I said. It's been a great chat. And I think, if I was just going to say one thing about transhumanism, it's that we're all a little bit of afraid about some of the things that can happen. But outside of that, historically speaking, science has just shown again and again to improve lives. And so I deal with this all the time. I did an interview the other day where I just was getting bashed by what can go wrong. And like I said, outside of artificial intelligence, I don't think that much can go wrong on a planetary way. In fact, especially one of the things that a lot of people don't discount transhumanism for is not realizing that with so much amazing science coming to the world, we might also be able to save some of our environmental issues as well. We might be able to give kind of a geofix, because we've been able to create nanotechnologies to replace different parts of the world that we blew up or that we burned down or whatever it is. There's a good argument to be made that transhumanism could actually be the leading front of environmentalism here in 10 or 15 years as well. So, I think when people start really looking at what it means to use science and technology more and more in our lives, it's not just about, transforming the human body. It's really about accelerating what it means to be a human being and probably establishing a much greater world in the future for all of humanity than otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And I assume that you're going to keep pushing these social issues as time progresses, because, it's not something that's just going to resolve itself overnight, right?
No. I mean, I think it's going to get far worse. I think there will be, like I said, there'll be major disruptions in society as when people start really coming out with a robotic eye and, augmented parts, and the neighbor gets a job because one uses a bionic arm and one doesn't. I think that's when you're going to start having some real social conflicts, especially, given the fact that, in America, at least, we live in a still very Judeo-Christian world, which would normally say, don't mess with your body. At least that's what, the Bible would say. And, they run the government, these people, almost everyone's a believer, at least that's a politician. So there will be conflicts that arise. I think the question is really, first off, the bigger question is, if China or Russia does it first, we have to also do it because we got to keep up with them. And then I think the second question is, beyond morals, is it also helping to contribute towards prosperity overall? And that's where I really think transhumanism can hit a home run. If we can figure out a way to use transhumanism to make more equality in society, that's going to be the home run that really works for transhumanism. And that's almost why most transhumanists, I would say, even those that are very conservative, do support a basic income, because we really realize that in order to enter into this age, we need to make sure that everybody can enter sort of at the same time with the same opportunities.
And I just wanted to add as well, I am agnostic. I am more of a spiritual believer in all these sorts of things. I probably lean more towards Buddhism, Shintoism. But my take on it is that even if we are strictly religious, our religious texts do allow for, some give and take between advancing society and, keeping ourselves as close to God or Allah or, whatever entity you believe in is possible. It's just how we interpret our religious texts. And I think hopefully with this podcast and, all the other things that we've been doing, we can start to bridge these gaps. So it's not just a whole, religion versus science as it's always been, but hopefully we can merge these things closer together.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm hoping more and more traditional Christians will just come out and be like, you know what? This technology that we have is all part of God's plan. And if we can use it for the good of humanity, then it's all part of God's plan. And I think that applies to whether it's Islam or Judaism or Christianity. And I think Buddhism and religions out of India, Hinduism, they're a bit more accepting of different technologies. It's really the Abrahamic religions that seem to be more nitpicky with it. But I think there's a good chance that at some point everybody just says, you know what, we're helping people out. We're making people live better, stay more length of lives with their families and whatnot. So this is a good thing. And, if it's here, then it's all part of God's will. So at least that's kind of the idea that I push in order to say it can be compatible with religion, even if religion on the surface sometimes seems to not be compatible with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're using the internet to access our Bibles, Torahs, Qurans, etc. So
totally, of course.
But I don't mean to bash on it. It's just, I am concerned because I live in Utah. We are a very religious state. So, I'm trying to, trying to approach both sides of the aisle and try to, show a common ground between the two. But I don't want to drag on too long because we're running out of time here. But with that said, I just want to take a second and thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're out in Napa right now, so I'll let you get back to setting up the winery. But yeah, any final remarks?
No, thank you. I'm glad we touched on some spirituality. More and more, as I'm pushing transhumanism forward in the public, I am kind of reaching out to that idea because I just think it's important. With 85% of our world being somewhat religious, it's important to also reach out and say, look, it's not just a secular movement. It can be a movement for anyone as long as it's helping humanity out.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, thank you for that. I'll let you get going. And to conclude out, again, this has been Tyler Janes with Zoltan Istvan, and this is Humanity and Beyond.
Thanks for having me.